What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another video. And my video that released maybe 2 weeks ago regarding how loose Star Wars figures are graded seemed to be a big hit. And by popular demand, both privately as well as publicly in the comments, I've decided to go ahead and make a sequel video regarding carded figures and how carded mint on card figures are graded. And if you did not catch the original video on loose graded figures, I will put a link to that video in the description below for this video. But I appreciate all of the positive feedback, and so I thought we would take a look at mint on card figures. Before I dig in too much more, I want to say thank you to my Patreon supporters. Your support allows me to make more and better videos, and I really appreciate the support. Back to this video, we're going to take a look at how I think the graders grade mint on card figures, and a number of factors can affect it. Whether it has a price tag, creases, whether it's punched or unpunched, is the bubble yellow, how does the figure look, are the weapons still taped to the inside of the blister? All of these are factors that affect the grade, or may not. We'll have to see. Ooh, see, that's what we call a teaser. Before I dig in too much, let's take a look at how AFA likes to designate mint on card figures by their three categories of gold, silver, and bronze. So let's take a look at that first, and then what we're going to do is take a look at all of the sub-scores. Yes, one of the unique things about mint on card figures is that there are three sub-scores for the card, the blister, and the figure, and how those interact with one another to come up with the overall score. And we're going to take a look at a number of different examples in my collection, not just these three. And I think that you'll find this video interesting, especially if you've never graded before or if you're just starting out and have questions like this. The gold level for AFA's mint on card figures is 85 plus to 100. I can tell you that with hundreds of submissions over the years with AFA and collector archive services, I have never received an 85 plus or higher on any vintage item. It is very difficult to do, and it has to be almost better than case fresh. The silver level is very achievable though. I've gotten many 85s and 80 pluses and 80s over the years. 75 plus has some very minor wear, and in some cases very noticeable wear, but only in certain spots of the card, blister, or the figure. And then finally we have the bronze level for AFA, which consists of grades that are 70 and below. And you can expect to see some pretty major flaws that are noticeable even just at a casual glance, such as cracks in the blister, major crushing, the card back could have creases, or even the proof of purchase could be cut out. Where it falls on the bronze level depends on how major these flaws are and how many of them there are. So now let's take a look at each of the sub-scores individually. Alright, now that we have a better idea of how the grading companies take a look at an overall product, let's dig into the sub-scores, starting with the card back. I'm going to let you guys read through this yourself, but a couple of important points that I wanted to make. First, if you've got a card that has ink or foreign markings, touch up where there was damage before that the owner tried to cover up, tape, any kind of staples, things like that, that can disqualify it from grading. Collector Archive will preserve grade it and just look at the figure itself, but if you're looking to get a carded figure graded with 3 sub-scores, if those kind of things have happened, it will probably be disqualified. On price stickers, a lot of collectors don't realize that price stickers don't hurt the sub-score unless it's placed in such an area that covers up something key like the artwork or the character, things like that. If it's in the corner and it hasn't curled or been torn at all, it won't affect the score. Let's take a look at a few examples in my collection. Okay, so I picked out a few carded examples in my collection, and each one of these I picked out for a different reason. And I'll try to keep it brief, but I want to show you what I think that graders were looking at when they decided on the score. And let's start with this one. This is a 32 back A IG88, really nice item, and you know, I've shown this before on my channel, but this one scored an 80 and an 80 for the blister and figure, but it got a 75 for the card score, which I actually think is pretty generous, giving it a 75 plus. Well, it must have been pretty rough to get an overall 75 plus when two of the subscores were 80s. And you can see why when you take a closer look. First, around the hang tab there, you can see a very prominent crease, which does protrude through to the other side. More on that in a little while, but some creases go all the way through to the other side, like this one, and others, the crease does not. When the crease does not go through all the way to the other side, that's considered a pretty minor flaw, and the graders will ding it, but it won't be as substantial as a crease like this that goes all the way through on both sides. Next, you can see pretty major litho damage right here. Anytime you get litho damage, that's good for pretty significant points off. Just this right here, and this right here, and this right here, that's enough to knock 10 points off in my book. You know, I would, you know, and so from my perspective, I'm really surprised it got a 75 score. The front of the card's pretty nice. You know, it's got some pretty minor wear. I'm trying to get it in the light here for you guys. You know, it's got a little bit of wave to the card. You know, you can kind of see that around here. But overall, the front of the card is pretty good. So this is why, you know, these three items were probably the major reason why this card got the score it did. Is, you know, there's some more litho damage down here. So all of that litho damage was enough to take this from an 85 near mint all the way down to a 75. And that 75 was hard enough on the card subscore to bring the total score all the way down to a 75 plus. Okay, I spoke too long there. Next, regarding litho damage, see, this one also has litho damage. But this is really the only spot on the entire card that has major damage. But it was viewed by AFA to not be significant enough to drop it down to a 75 card subscore. So the card still got an 80 overall, even though it does have some pretty prominent litho damage just in that one spot, whereas the IG-88 had 3 or 4 or 5 different spots. So it was able to still eke out an 80 subscore for the card, even though it had litho damage. Next, I want to show you an example going back to the IG-88 again, where you do have some creases. Let's see if we can show them here. You can see a little crease right here, and you can see a crease right here. And then when you go on the back, it's not nearly as prominent. This one actually is pretty prominent. It's got a pretty big crease there. But I noticed some other creases. Let's see if we can find it. Yeah, right in here. You can see there's some spider veins right in here. These spider veins don't really show up on the front of the card. And let's see if we can show it. Yeah, see how clean the front of the card looks? So because these spider veins are not nearly as prominent, and they don't go through all the way to the other side like they do on the IG-88, they can get the subscore is still an 80. And that's probably a little generous, but maybe not. I don't know. It might score an 80 with AFA too. But that's an example of where a vein on the card or a crease on the card that didn't penetrate all the way through to the other side didn't really kill the score too badly. Next, let's talk about price stickers. I just told you guys that price stickers do not affect the grade overall if the sticker is in a good spot, like in a corner, and if it's clean and hasn't been picked at or torn at and things like that. And this is a perfect example of one. This is a Tri-Logo AT-AT driver with a KB Toys price sticker. And see how clean that sticker is? It's right in the corner. It obviously hasn't been picked at. It's not curling over or anything like that. So it didn't hurt the subscore, the card subscore. And so you can see here the card score got an 85. And this card is dead mint. I mean, it is just awesome shape. So, you know, that's something to keep in mind. A lot of collectors didn't know that the stickers wouldn't hurt the score. But if it's in a corner like that and it clearly has not been played with and it's still down, you know, really clean like this, your score with AFA, UKG, or CAS will not be hurt by it. And then finally is punched versus unpunched. That is an item also that I get a ton of questions about. They see some items that I'll post on my Instagram, and they're like, how did it get an 85 or an 80 when it's been punched? And this is a good example. This is a Luke Skywalker, and this, obviously, the hang tab is punched. But if you look at the card subscore, it's still got an 85. So as long as the punch is clean, it doesn't have any tears around it or creasing around the punch, you can still get an 85 subscore for the card, even though it's not unpunched or punched, however you want to say it. But it's a fairly clean break on the punch, And so AFA said, okay, that's clean. You know, this is case fresh other than the punch. And so we will give that an 85. So if you have a punched card that has a clean price sticker with veins that do not, or creases that do not penetrate to the other side of the card, you can still get a high subscore. The next subscore we're going to take a look at is the blister, or the window, sometimes called the bubble. And you can see the list of defects that AFA lists on their website, but all three grading companies use the same general guidelines. One important point is regarding clouding. You can have a clear yellowed blister and it may not hurt the subscore that much, or if at all, but if it's heavily clouded to the point where the figure is obscured, that really hurts the blister subscore. Let's take a look at a few examples right now, each telling a different story. So now let's take a look at 3 mint-on cards in my collection where the blister tells an interesting story for the blister subscore. The first is my 21A back R5D4. You guys have already seen this numerous times, so I'm not going to belabor the point on it. The only thing I wanted to point out is that it has a price sticker on the side of the blister, and it's very firmly attached. It does not take away from the overall presentation of the figure, or the mint-on card. So the blister received an 85 subscore, as you can see there. Now the key point I want to make is that if the price sticker, let's say the price sticker was right on the front of that blister to the point where you couldn't see the figure at all, that would hurt it pretty dramatically. It would probably drop it to an 80 at a minimum, and just because it takes away from it. Now if it's got dings in the blister, and it actually had the price sticker on the front, it would probably drop it to a 75. So there are services, as I've mentioned in past videos, there are services available where you pay $150 or whatever, and they very carefully remove it. They will very carefully remove that sticker from either the blister or the card back, but I've never risked it. I just don't want to. I don't want to risk it because it's all the risk is on the owner if something goes wrong. So another point that I want to make regarding the blister, if it's cracked, not the inner tray for like Return of the Jedi figures that have an inner tray inside the blister. I'm talking about the blister on the outside. If the blister is cracked in any way, that will automatically drop the blister subscore to no higher than a 60. That's been my experience anyway. I'm not saying that's a definite, but that's pretty firm on that. If you got a crack in the actual blister, you can expect the subscore to be no higher than a 60, and it will really hurt the overall score, obviously. Next, let's take a look at my Return of the Jedi Imperial TIE Fighter. And as is common with a lot of the Return of the Jedi figures, the blisters yellow over time. Even ones that have been labeled as non-yellowed on the label, sometimes they will turn yellow. And this is a case where it was already yellowed when it was scored. Let's see if we can get it to focus. 77 back A. It's got a yellow for the overall score, and that's because the blister's yellowed. But you'll see that the blister subscore is still an 85 near mint plus score. These are all straight 85s. So that's important. A lot of collectors didn't know that if you have a yellowed blister, it does not affect the subscore. It will just affect whether they include that Y designation. It's called a qualifier. So they will give the overall score 85 if it's a near mint blister, but it'll receive a qualifier with the Y next to it to let you know that it is yellowed. So it is still possible to get an 85 or even a 90 blister score even though it's yellowed. Now, let's take a look at this Luke Jedi. This tells a really good story as it pertains to the blister subscore. This is a beautiful item. This is a tri-logo, and you can see I've got it encased with blister protection. Now, if you look at the overall scores for this, the card got an 85, the figure got an 85, but the blister got a 75, giving it an overall 75 plus. And I'm gonna talk more about that towards the end of this video. But that blister subscore of 75 brought the overall score all the way down, and you can see lots. Let's see if we can get a better angle here. You can see lots of dings and dents, which is common with these tri-logos. It's very difficult to find near mint tri-logos, but it's got dings and dimples all over the top of that blister, and the rest of the blister is in pretty good shape. But Those to me, this was graded pretty harsh. I probably would have given this an 80 overall, but that's what AFA said. So they gave it a 75 plus because the Blister sub-score was so low, it brought the overall score down for the entire item down to a 75 plus. Finally, let's take a look at the figure sub-score. And here's what AFA had to say on their website. The actual figure will be considered mint unless there's some defects that detract from its overall eye appeal. And the points to keep in mind here are discoloration to the figure just due to plastic degradation over time, overspray or other factory defects, and also, more importantly, if it's a carded figure like a Power of the Force figure that comes with a collector coin, the coin will also be taken into account on the figure subscore. Now, let's take a look at a few examples in my collection. And so here are 3 examples in my collection where the figure subscore tells a different story with each one of these. First, let's take a look at my 47 question mark back Cloud Car palette. This is a beautiful example. The figure itself is crystal white. A lot of white figures will experience discoloration over time. So, for example, the Hoth Stormtrooper, Leia, the regular Stormtrooper, all of those can yellow over time just due to plastic degradation. So sometimes you'll see 85 for the card score, 85 for the blister score, and a 75 for the figure score. And that's just because it's degraded over time. That's not what's happened in this example. In this example, the blaster has come loose from the tape. I'm not sure if you can even see it. There it is. You see the tape that's on the inside of the blister? That blaster has come loose. When that happens, the highest score that you can receive from AFA or really any of the grading companies is going to be an 80. That's because they view that as a defect. And, you know, to me, that's not really fair because, you know, that tape is just going to stop having stickiness over time. This is a 40-year-old figure, but that's how they do it. So if the weapons and accessories that, you can see the communicator is still taped to the side of the blister, but the blaster has come loose. So that means that the figure subscore is an 80, as you can see here. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're looking at ungraded mint on card figures, that if the weapons that are normally taped to the side of the blister have come loose, the highest score you're going to get, max, is going to be an 80. Now here's another example. This is my Luke on the 41 back survival kit offer. As you can see, his torso has started to discolor over time, which is a common defect with this Luke Bespin. But you can see the color of the torso is slightly darker than the limbs or the arms and the legs. It's just discoloration that just happens over time. And so you can see here that the figure score got a 75. Now also the blaster has come loose. The blaster has come loose from its tape. So you got 2 different things going against it. If the torso was not discolored and it was just the blaster that had come loose, that figure subscore would probably be an 80. But because the blaster has come loose and the torso is discolored, it gets the 75 figure score. So that's what happened with that one. Next, I've already shown this one fairly recently, but this is my Made in Spain Return of the Jedi Greedo. Now, for these Greedo figures, typically the blaster is inserted into his hand before it's put in the blister. So when this was sent to me, and the photos on eBay showed the blaster still in his hand. So when it was graded straight 85s, as you can see here, assuming, there he goes. So the card got an 85, the card got an 85, blister got an 85, and the figure got an 85. But unfortunately, during shipping, that blaster fell out of Greedo's hand. And so technically, this is only an 80 figure subscore. So that's kind of silly to me. And I was talking to Blacked Out Ewoks, a fellow YouTuber, about that. It's just gravity, folks. That's going to happen sometimes, but that's how they would really score it if I was going to send it back in. Now, I still think it would get an 85 overall score because the other 2 subscores are so high, and it's really just the blaster that has fallen out. But keep that in mind when you're looking at ungraded mint on card figures, and take a look at factory examples that are case fresh and see whether the blaster was just packed in loose, whether it was taped to the side, like with the Cloud Car palette and the Luke Bespin, or if it was inserted into his hand, like with the Greedo. So now that we've gone through all the different subscores, I think you guys have a pretty good idea now of what the grading companies look for in terms of defects. I've already said this, but I want to emphasize it. The overall score is not an average of the subscores. If one particular subscore is really low, it can bring down the overall score. In other words, each item tells its own story, and that's what's so cool about mint on card graded figures. So that about wraps up this video. I hope that using this information, you guys are able to find mint on card vintage Star Wars figures and submit them for grading and see higher grades. If you ever have any questions, you can always reach out to me by Instagram. Just know that I'm here to answer questions and help as best I can, or give you a general idea of where I think it might grade out. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe for future content. Thanks for watching.